we're talking about Love Points Away, which is really about what it does. And it's the third series in the Science of Mind textbook written by our founder, Ernest Holmes. And what it does, and I thought, how could I capture this in one way? And for those of you who are familiar with our spiritual mind treatment, which is our form of affirmative prayer, to me what this says is this is all about the second step. The first step is God is all there is. And that's what we covered when we talked about it in the first week, this thing. What is this thing? And then what it does, it's all about the second step. It's about our unity. Because the second step is all about our connection with God. The fact that we are one with it. And that's what this is all about. Because the divine cannot do anything until it does it through us. That's what it does. It does it through us. Now there are a lot of words written in 1926 language, which sometimes is a little hard to wrap our heads around. Some of us have an easier time, and when I say us, I'm not in that us. I personally, if you ever look at mine, I've got a couple different Signs of Mind texts, and I have read this numerous times, and each time there's a fresh enlightenment that I get. Because the first time I read it, I thought, I don't get it. I don't get any of this. But of course, I stuck with it. And that's what spiritual mind treatment is actually. Some people say, I don't get it. I don't see it. You don't see what it does. But what it does, it's already doing. It's doing at the level of your consciousness. That's where you come into play. You're the conscious part of it. I was at the kids' playground yesterday in Balboa Park. There's a part of me that's as much of a kid today as I was when I was a kid. I love to see children at play because what I see is a fearlessness that somehow disappears when we get to be adults. And that's sad. Because it's our fearlessness and our faith and knowing that we are one with the divine, that it operates through us, which we can bring into reality and manifestation our desires. And kids don't have that fear. I saw a kid, no, she wasn't even bigger than this, climbing up a slide. The steps are this far apart. Now for you and I, that's not a big step. This little girl was using all of her upper body strength to pull her legs up in the next one. She'd take a step and she'd look over at this other, like a merry-go-round type of thing, and she'd say, Dad! And nothing happens. She turns back and she takes another step up. Dad! Pretty soon she gets to the top and Dad appears. And she then gets in, slides down. But before she does, she takes a moment to look at him, and he says, go ahead. And she's, whew. And that's what this is all about to me. That's us. That's exercising our muscle. We're pulling up ourselves up each step. And what we do is we say, Dad, or God. Usually it's God help me. God, and it's not like look at me. It's like validation, it's like connection, it's like knowing you're there. And that demonstrated so much for me, this principle. It's, if you can tap into that kid had faith. I mean, can you imagine what it must look like? Every once in a while I get down on my knees to look at what level the kid is looking at. We all look pretty big. A lot of these kids, they're looking right here. That's as high as they can get. Yet they're not afraid. They're not afraid, and they will try. She was not. She went up there. Now to her, that had to be 6 times her height. I mean, we're only talking the side. And yet she went down. And that's what I think when we get through, if you study these 10 pages, they're 10 pages. Not a lot. It's big print. For some of us, we like big print. But It's 10 pages. And if you read it, if you have to read it 10 times, so what? If you grasp it, if you grasp the fact that there's a principle here that you can do it. And the secret is, it's no secret. It's an inside job. I remember a long time ago, many years ago, I had all the success markers in my life. Job, career, home, all of those things. And yet there was a part of me that was really unhappy. And I remember telling my son at the time, I was saying, you know, if I would give all of this up if I could find happiness. If I could truly know happiness. And know it without a doubt. So I did. I spent the next 10 or 12 years. I went to workshops, I read, I studied. I did almost every religious, spiritual practice that you could think of. I did Buddhist, I did Hindu, I did Native Americans. I did a lot of study. I did a lot of contemplation. And the secret is so obvious. It's an inside job. I'm the one that's responsible for my happiness. None of you are. Nobody is. Nobody can make you happy. It's all how you relate to the circumstances and events in your life, whether you're happy or not. It's so amazing. I can't believe it took me so long to figure it out. My son said I was the kid who rode on the special little bus. But it took me a while to figure it out. But it's an inside job, and when you know it, when you know that you have that faith, that it can happen through you, then I think that's where the real joy comes. And what I like about this is, the Science of Mind, of course, is my favorite daily guides, and Margaret Stortz is just doing a phenomenal job dovetailing with my talk series. I love it. I don't have to pay her extra. She helps. But she writes, and that's actually a couple days ago, she wrote about the personhood of God. And the reason why that's important to me is many of us grew up in an organized religion where God was outside of ourselves. And some of the challenges has to let go of that attachment. Some of the letting go is, we believe that God was created in our image, even though it says we are created in God's image. We tend to make God in our image, and we usually create him as one of our parents. No, not my parent. And we usually make it male. And it's so interesting because none of those characteristics, I mean, I don't really know yet for sure. I'll let you know. Well, I probably won't when I pass over. But we don't know. I'm assuming it's all energy, whatever it is, and it has no gender. But it certainly has a magical force in my life. And what I like about what she wrote in here is that Ernest Holmes says, the allness is within us, or we may say that within us is the only place we can contact it. So if you think about it, your body is a sacred space. It's a sacred vessel. You are a place where you can connect with the divine. And what she goes on to say is, while the big guy in the sky, I love this, big guy in the sky theory does not make much sense to most of us, we still need to discover a personal sense of the infinite aliveness. Holmes said, God becomes personal to all who feel the indwelling presence. That is such an important phrase to me, because when you feel it, when you know that you have that connection to God, nothing will shake it. Life will happen, and life will deal you some challenges. They're like speed bumps for me. Some of them are bigger than others. But the speed bump for me is a chance to stop and look at how I'm living my life and see whether I'm living my life on purpose and with intention. It gives me a time to look and say, do I want to keep going? Do I want to make a correction? And Ernest Holmes has a famous saying about that, change your thinking, change your life. And it's true. You can do it right at this moment. You can decide to change. But she says, as we each commune with the infinite in our own ways, and that's another important thing I have to say, we each have our own personal way. That's what makes it personal to us. So don't fall for that trap that there is a right way and somebody else has it and you don't. And you're looking for that and you believe what they say and you're going to try it and you don't understand why it doesn't work for you because it's not personal to you. You make it personal to you. You grab that which relates to you, which is your personal experience of the divine within you. And she goes on, she says, it would be perfectly natural for us to have a personal closeness in this relationship. And we learn that as we turn to God, God turns to us. That's why it's called a relationship. As we turn to God. And why do you think God would turn to us? God turns to us because we're the only outlet. We're just like electricity. You plug a lamp into the socket to get light. We plug into God to express. It can't be expressed otherwise. So we are that necessary conduit for the expression. That's why it's a personal relationship. It is we, she says, who fashion what the divine response will be. That's our job. It's not about being holy or sanctimonious or any of that. Just be natural. Be yourself. And plug in. And be that expression. And she writes, it is ours to trust in a divine presence and knows us as a part of itself. And if you truly believe that God is all there is, then it cannot be otherwise. That must be a true statement. That absolutely must be true. You must be one with it. And when we bring our vitality into our relationship with the divine, it must respond to us in a vital way. We do not need an external big guy. Isn't that wonderful when you think about it? It's reassuring. I was looking at my refrigerator. I mentioned this last week. I had to go double check to make sure that's really still was not a magnet on there. And it is. I have another magnet on my refrigerator that says, leap and trust you'll build your wings on the way down. That's what these kids in the playground are doing. Yeah. There were some other kids I was watching, and they have this thing. I love this new equipment. I can understand why they only allow people from 7 to 12 to play on it, because I'd have been on it. They had this kind of like loops. And these kids, this one little girl, I don't know, she was about that long. I don't know how long that is or how big that is. But she was going from loop to loop. But what I noticed is it looked like she was skipping every other loop, which would have made it easier for what she was doing was stretching herself. Isn't that a wonderful, visionary thing? We can stretch ourselves. Too often we play safe and go for the easy next step. She wasn't doing that. She was stretching herself and going for that extra leap. And she did that all the way up over this. It was like an arc. It was so beautiful. It was wonderful to watch. I think kids to me are just such teachers of this practice we have called Science of Mind. It's about, this week for me, it's all about what it does. It's about having the belief that it's true, that it's true, that it works for you, it works for me, and that we can, through our thinking, I'm going to say right thinking, not that there's a wrong thinking, but our right thinking is sitting down and have positive thoughts about what's happening. We exercise our spiritual muscle. And what we know about January, it's always and time for new resolutions, and you're going to exercise, you're going to go to the gym. January, you can't find a parking space at most gyms. They all drive right up to the front door and then walk in to exercise for an hour. But everybody exercises, right? Well, you have a spiritual muscle. And the more you use it, the more you will connect with it, the more you will manifest with it, the more you will manifest your desires. Now, I have to warn you. There's a warning label, just like on the medicine bottles. The better you get at manifesting and desires, then you have to start cleaning up your thinking. Because what happens is you manifest your thoughts, both positive and negative. Because the universe is impersonal and does not care. It will manifest. And so part of my challenge is, as I practice more and more, is I have to be careful. Now sometimes doubts do creep in. Absolutely. And there's a section in here, and in the reading, you'll read that it says, even with some doubt, the power of your words and the power of your thoughts will still manifest. But if you do a treatment, and you do all the rhetoric, and you go through all the steps, just like it was written in the book, and then you close it with, I hope. I hope this happens. You have just taken a magic eraser to everything, like Etch-a-Sketch. For those of you who remember Etch-a-Sketch, I just shook it. It's gone. The I hope. Because what we know about the third step, about realization, is you say it as if you already have it. Because you know that it's available to you. That's why you give gratitude as the fourth step. That's what it's about. There's another one in here. This one is for today. If I go to the right page. I like this one because I didn't learn this until late in life. I'm such a late bloomer. So it says, might as well relax. I love that. And what Science of Mind says, God is in all, through all, above all, which means that we partake of the one life. And why I wanted to read this piece, a couple pieces, because it's something that many of us do. See if you identify with any of this. In all spiritual practices, one of the cherished goals is to become calm and relaxed, so that we might be receptive to what the infinite has for us. We all know this, but the practice of it is another matter. She says, this is Margaret Storch, who's been a minister for like 30 years and president of this and that, and is a very well sought after practitioner. She says, we all know this, but I seem to be wired for intensity. And I can quickly get excited if I'm upset in any way. Now this is a woman who actually throws it out there and says, this happens to me, I'm human. Or you could say she's a spiritual being having a human experience. I don't care how you say it, if you get it. If you get that you have that connection. Because she says, this tends to make the divine messaging difficult to receive. Because what Ernest Holmes tells you is that no gift can be given until it's received. And if your airwaves, your internet, internal internet, is all blocked up with intensity and upsettedness and anger and pain and complaining, you can't hear. You can't hear, it can't get through. It can't get through the fog. And she says, it's good to remember that prayer, one of our great spiritual practices, does not make things happen. Isn't that interesting? Prayer does not make things happen. It lets things happen. It lets things happen. It doesn't make them happen. I think to make it happen is a help me God type of response. That's how I interpret that. That's mine. You can put your own spin on it. But it allows it to happen. It's in the natural flow of life. You are in the natural flow of life. And what Ernest Holmes writes, The self-givingness of the Spirit through the desire of life to express itself in terms of creation. We are its creation. So it gets to express through us. Is that not a wonderful idea? Think about how celebrated you should feel about yourself and your life. And if you don't have happiness, then I ask you, think about why not. And think about what internal house cleaning you might want to do to dust those cobwebs of doubt away and rebuild it with faith and exercise that spiritual muscle of yours. That spiritual muscle that says, yes, I am worthy of it. I am one with the divine and nothing is withheld from me. Let me close with this other one because I just love it. I feel like I'm reciting totally out of this, but I wrote a lot about this textbook, but I kept thinking, how can I make this real to you? Because if I don't make the words come alive, they're meaningless. I want you to be able to see how you can integrate it and make it yours and make it part of your life, because that's what we're doing here today. We're trying to see how can we have tools to live a life that really enhances us, that we have a thriving life, and the theme for this year is to live a life of intention. And how can we do that? So Joel Goldsmith said, and this is under enlightenment, we are told to have the mind in which was also in Christ Jesus. We already have it, but it's necessary to attain a realization of it. And what that speaks to me is I don't go into the Jesus as a savior type for me. I go in the fact that Jesus was a great example. He showed us the way. He even said, you will do greater works than these. So it is a wonderful example for us to, and Christ is really a title for consciousness. It wasn't Jesus' last name. It's alive in consciousness. So as we become alive, and I like this other thing is because it ties into my experience, the science of mind. What is it we need for greater freedom? Nothing but a greater realization of what we already know. Thank you.